This article examines the complex dynamics of migration from Sharia-governed societies to the liberal and secular democracies of the West. It highlights the ideological conflicts, socio-political tensions, and theological contradictions that arise when entire communities seek refuge in countries founded on freedoms they often reject or despise. The text also analyzes the responses of host nations, with particular focus on the recent political resolve to defend democratic values against the provocations of radical Islamism. 1. Introduction. In recent decades, Europe, above all, has become a sanctuary for people fleeing the political, economic, and social instability typical of regimes based on Sharia law. Many of these migrants come from countries where human rights are systematically violated, where blasphemy laws persecute religious minorities, and where economic failure is cloaked in religious rhetoric. This creates a disturbing paradox. Those fleeing oppressive theocratic regimes often bring with them ideologies hostile to the very freedoms that offered them refuge. 2. The tragedy of failed Islamic governments. Countries that enforce Sharia law are often characterized by widespread corruption, economic collapse, gender-based discrimination, religious intolerance. Instead of assuming responsibility for these failures, the ruling religious elites shift the blame to the West, accusing former colonial powers like France and Britain of cultural sabotage or economic imperialism. Meanwhile, their citizens, disillusioned and exhausted, emigrate precisely to the countries that their own governments publicly condemn. Perfetto. Ecco la traduzione in inglese, Part 2, paragraphs 3 and 4. 3. The contradiction of integration in Europe. Upon arriving in Europe, migrants encounter societies based on freedom of speech, gender equality, religious pluralism, the rule of law. These are precisely the values that enabled the West to build systems of justice, infrastructure, and prosperity. Yet many migrants do not integrate. Instead, they demand that Western laws conform to Sharia, the very same legal system that devastated their countries of origin. Radical preachers have increasingly emerged across Europe, calling for the implementation of Islamic jurisprudence, the subjugation of women, hatred toward Christians, Jews, and secular people. These individuals exploit freedom of speech and religion to spread ideologies fundamentally incompatible with liberal democracy. 4. The Western response and the limits of tolerance. Western governments have begun to re-evaluate the boundaries of multiculturalism. A concrete example: Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni's decision to deport a well-known Islamist preacher, notorious for his primitive and tribal views on women and minorities. Ironically, after receiving his deportation notice, the preacher radically changed his rhetoric. He praised democracy, expressed love for European culture, and even admiration for local cuisine. This sudden reversal reveals an essential truth: calls for tolerance by certain extremists are often not sincere, but strategic. When faced with the prospect of returning to the countries they once glorified, they prefer to remain in Europe, the very place they previously despised. 5. Theological implications. Hospitality, yes, but with discernment. From a theological perspective, this crisis demands discernment. The Bible calls us to welcome the stranger, Hebrews 13 verse 2, but also to act with wisdom, Proverbs 4 verse 7, and to defend justice and truth, Isaiah 1 verse 17. A more direct verse is 1 Timothy 5 verse 8. If anyone does not provide for his own, especially for his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. Welcoming others does not mean justifying destructive ideologies that threaten the moral and spiritual foundations of society. As St. Paul reminds us, Galatians 5 verse 1. It is for freedom that Christ has set us free. Stand firm then, and do not let yourselves be burdened again by a yoke of slavery. 6. Conclusion. The West must not abandon its core values for fear of being labeled intolerant. A democracy that tolerates intolerance undermines itself. Migration should be a bridge to peace, not a Trojan horse for theocratic tyranny. Both host nations and migrant communities must honor the social contract built on liberty, mutual respect, and peaceful coexistence. It must be stated with moral clarity: those who flee authoritarianism must not seek to recreate it in the lands that granted them liberty. Sharia law, when imposed as a system of government, has failed everywhere it has been tried. It is neither justifiable nor acceptable in secular democracies. Europe must defend its sovereignty, its identity, and its freedom. True freedom cannot coexist with ideologies that aim to destroy it.